I've actually heard this. I can't remember where I picked it up, but I had heard through somewhere of like a judge and neighbor worksheet or something like tool maybe like that. I'm not sure about my memory here, but I believe it was actually uh, sort of being used as a communication tool in relationships. So I think that's the topic. I don't really have a lot of specifics in terms of a question, but I would, yeah, just like to bring that forward for discussion. I think it might, few questions, follow-on questions might come up in that, but it's like, hey, there's this possibility of being able to communicate some things. For example, we know that communicating needs is pretty better understood, I think, than ever, how needs are underlying, or unmet needs are underlying people's relational challenges or conflicts. And so just being able to express one's needs is can be like a huge step or really productive. But yeah, I guess the first question is, what are your thoughts on that?
Mm, yeah, yeah. So um, it can be used that way. I've seen it used that way. I've tried it that way. Um, it depends on a few things. It depends on the relationship and the stability of the relationship, the connection and trust that people have. The more of that that's there, the more trust that's there, the more um, you can write a really uncensored judge your neighbor worksheet and read it to your partner and and have them really understand you better and be um, even touched by your sharing and your vulnerability and all of that. It can also backfire if that trust is not there and can just add gasoline on the fire if the relationship is not in that place of a lot of trust because now we're pointing the finger, right? That's what the judge and neighbor worksheet is. It's like I'm judging you, and it's your fault, and that's what I'm believing, and that's what I'm writing, and that's what I would be reading. So it takes a lot of ability to witness that and to hold that in order for that to come off, but it can be done. Can be done. I actually, I used to do it with clients. I used to offer it with clients. I actually kind of stopped offering it with clients in general because uh, I'm not Byron Katie, and Byron Katie does this with people. She has a lot of there's a lot of trust in Byron Katie already,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a big piece right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was working with new people, didn't know me from Adam, and it it didn't go as well. I didn't have the skills, or they didn't have the trust, or whatever part of that equation was missing. It just didn't really seem to work so well for me. So that's first part of the answer to your question. The second is that there are kind of two things going on here. One is when I write a judge your neighbor worksheet, I'm writing out my needs, for example. You mentioned needs, but these are my stressed out version of my needs, and so unless the other person is really clear, I'm going to be giving them my stressed version of needs, which may not actually be my real needs. They may be,
Mm.
and so like again, there has to be a lot of clarity, a lot of understanding and space to be able to sort that out. Now that does get sorted out if the person then facilitates them on the work. Now that's when it starts to open up again because I pointed the finger at the other person. Uh, I'm reading them my worksheet, let's
Mm-hmm.
say. They might start to get triggered by what I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading to them. But then when I start doing my work and I start showing how I react and who I'd be without the thought and turning it around, they may start to see, oh, they're more open than I thought. And that can be very bonding. It can be very beautiful. It can bring people together if they can get over the hurdle of the original, pointing the finger.
Mm.
So, but what you mentioned is a really good point. Needs, we do need to communicate our needs. That's part of why we're angry in the first place. We've let our needs not be communicated, and then we've let it become anger, and now we're blurting it out onto paper, and or we're yelling it at them in worst case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Judge Your Neighbor worksheet is going to contain some things that are valid here as well, but they've been shrouded in stress, and so it's going to take un some working through that to uh, to reveal that. And the nice thing about when you do the work, you will also find usually that what I thought I needed, I don't actually need, or I already have, or some versions of that. So yeah, so there's a lot of things I'm kind of touching on
Mm-hmm.
here, but I guess my bottom line is I do the work for myself to become less attached to my stories, less bound by my stories. And I tend to do it with people that are neutral. I tend to do it that way. And that's just me. I just feel like I can be more open and honest that way. But there, I know, I know a number of people, many people that do the work of Byron Katie and work one on one with each other in very almost confrontational approach in a way. It sounds confrontational, but it isn't. A sharing of these things, and it can be very powerful. So, yeah, maybe it's above my pay grade.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer, Todd. And apologies for looking down. I was just making a few notes, but I was listening intently. Um, a couple things I'm taking away from your response. One is that, um, some measure of skill, or let's say at least familiarity, if not some measure of like maturity, or I don't know what the right word is, with with the work, because it does seem like it could be a real challenge to wear the multiple hats. You're this sort of like trying on the angry unheard child hat, while at the same time being the facilitator of a communication, and that could get a little easily messy. I didn't know that Katie did this kind of um, work with people with the Judge and Neighbor worksheet. I wonder, is that where like it was a communication between Katie and someone, and or was it, could you say a little bit more about that? Because I heard you say you stopped doing it and used to offer it. What exactly does she do?
What I've observed her do is she kind of moderates it, and she'll say, "Okay, you read your worksheet to the other person,"
Ah.
and then she says, "Has the other person you take that in, just say thank you and receive that, and and then this person or Katie herself will facilitate that person on what they
Mm.
wrote, and then they will start to turn it around, and they'll start to see. It can be amazing. It really can." Uh, but she moderates it. That's really what she did. And so another factor that I didn't mention before is that if the other person is facilitating, say it's just two people, a couple, for example, if the other person is facilitating, it's also kind of a requirement that they understand the work and that they're not giving advice or starting to use this as an opportunity to start pointing them where they should go and telling them what to do or manipulating in some way. So these are all factors to take in
Mm-hmm.
consideration. But ultimately, what the place or the environment that where the work can be done and done well is in a neutral environment. And so if that can be found in a relationship, a close relationship with somebody, if that can be found with the very person that I'm angry at, then my gosh, it's probably more powerful than doing it with someone
Mm.
else. But if it can't be, then it's better not to go there and do it in another place that is neutral, that is safe, where I can go inside and find my own
Mm-hmm.
answers, because that's what this book is
Mm-hmm.
about.
That is That really lands when you say that, the importance of neutrality. And it struck me when you said that, if that can be found in a relationship, you know, I'm almost thinking like that relationship's doing really well if if that level of trust to
Hmm.
be able to, so it's almost the phrase keeps coming to mind of kind of like advanced technique, or something like that, or further on in the growth of a relationship and growth as a person. But so it sounds like it could be really helpful. But the neutrality, I think the thing that the reservation I had initially to the idea, I think you've articulated that by talking about the neutrality. I didn't quite have the words for it. So the, or, the, if the person that's facilitating is also the what's it, offender or the offense, then
Yeah, the
there's
person you're
that's
judging.
clearly
Hmm.
why it's an advanced technique, because I have to somehow simultaneously or alternately hold these things, which can be quite a challenge, and why a moderator, it almost, I'm leaving this with a feeling of like just doing that between two people where they're at these two levels together, seems like a real challenge and something to be done carefully. Or
Well, and you can try it, right? If you're both parties are open or interested, you can try it. If they're already open, chances are there is that trust. There is enough trust there, right? Why not? The worst that could happen is you say, you know what, this doesn't work.
hmm hmm
Fine, and we just go back to doing the work somewhere else, and that's fine
Yeah,
too. So,
definitely.
yeah.
Although in the moment of stress, it may not feel that way. A few moments later, it's pretty clear that, yeah, especially if you're being able to have that kind of conversation with someone, then you're probably pretty solid. And also just, yeah, I think the other thing I'm coming away with is the importance, or the real benefit of it going into the work. I'm almost feeling like for me, it would kind of need to, like, it couldn't really stop there, because where that's where it's sort of transmuted, if you will, or dissipated. It's only one step to
Yeah.
kind of vent, so
Yeah.
to speak.
I mean, in a way, it's about giving feedback, right? So there is value in giving feedback, and Byron Katie has a fair bit of training in that regard, and it's a really valuable thing. So with practice, I may be able to hear someone's Judge Your Neighbor worksheet, whether it's officially a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet or somebody just yelling at me off the record, um, and see that as feedback, and use and separate what's useful and not useful and not be triggered by it. This is a skill. It's a beautiful thing, and it can be something that could be cultured from this sort of um, use of a Judge Your Neighbor worksheet. But you're absolutely right. The going into the work of it is, for me, where the transformation happens. Like, I can't just magically be good at taking feedback. I may need to do some work, or I may not just because I've expressed my anger to someone may not mean that I'm now over my anger. I still need to work it, and to work it, I need to have the safety to and neutrality again to go in and find my own answers, find my own truth, find my own
Mm.
resolution. And sometimes when I'm in the presence of that person, I may put undue pressure on myself to come up with a resolution that isn't really my resolution.
Uh,
And so that can be, for me, a drawback to being in a situation like that. It just depends on the
uh,
situation. But
Another thing the
yeah,
neutrality offers is, or maybe the main thing, I don't know if we're ranking them, the space for the person to find their own true authentic answers, their own true authentic wisdom.
yeah, yeah. Because otherwise it can escalate into an argument, like, oh, you said that, no, I said no, you shouldn't be angry about that, or it can just go, it can be
Mm.
escalate right out of
Mm.
control if there's no presence or sort of ground rules or space. But done competently and gracefully, it can be huge. It can be very
Mm.
transformational. Yeah. and it can bring people together and give understanding for each other and compassion for each other. It's watching someone do the work when they were pointing it at you and seeing them see their discoveries. It's like a gift.
Mm.
It's really a
It
gift.
seems like there's so much
Yeah.
potential there. Yeah.